I was talking with Alex about e-commerce copy, and I think that stuff's really cool. And I think that not enough people talk about it. I asked him, like, hey, do you want to talk about e-commerce copy? And Alex was pretty stoked, and we were all pretty stoked, and that's why we're here.
But Luke, what show is this?
This is the Copy That show.
So this wasn't just like a spontaneous coming together.
No. This is our weekly show where we talk about copy, and we have coffee, or in my case, tea.
I have
I don't know.
oatmeal and an energy drink. If you were watching this from the YouTubes, that means that you are a person from the future. Hello, I hope COVID has gone away, and I hope that you're enjoying your flying car. In the description below this video, you will find a link to the Discord that we constantly mention on this show. Feel free to join us. Come for the copy, stay for the shit posting. Every now and again, we'll do something silly, like have an entire day where we create nothing but songs based on copywriting.
If you've ever wanted a copywriting fever dream, this is your opportunity to join one.
Speaking of copywriting fever dreams, Alex, I'm actually really glad to have you back on the show. Really enjoyed being on that panel with you and Rod. Was it a couple months ago at this point?
Yeah.
Must have been, yeah.
Time passes. People watching at home, it's like 10 years in the past, so don't worry about that. One reason why I wanted to have you on the show, why I was so excited about Luke's proposition about having you on the show, was because I've seen your trajectory pretty much from the beginning. Very close to when you started just dipping a pinky toe into the copywriting and marketing world, and then learning, growing, getting clients that sort of parlayed into deeper and deeper relationships. And you've built something for yourself. And I was wondering if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, talking a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. You kind of hit the nail on the head there, Sean. You came into the Discord, I guess, it must have been about a year ago at this point. And around that time, I'd already been working with clients, I'd say for about 6 months, but it was nothing huge. I was just getting into sales copy. I started to have an understanding of what funnels were. But before that, I didn't know what copywriting was. I wasn't marketing savvy. I'd kind of been interested in advertising, but it was kind of just, I'm interested in this thing. I really like writing. I've always done fiction writing and reading. Why can't I write as a job? And as so many people do, I came into it through content writing and doing articles and blog posts and stuff like that. The natural progression of it was I found out about copywriting. I understood people could actually write adverts and get paid. Then the Discord came about 2019, I think September. There was about 7 of us who started it from Reddit, and it was just we were all green, like none of us knew what we were doing. Someone would say, hey, this ad was cool. Like, yeah, that was cool. And then we probably built up to about 200 members. And that was when people like Jonathan and you, Sean, started to join. And we got a kind of influx of expertise and people who were in different sectors of advertising actually bringing their view of what they do into it, which was so eye-opening. One of the things that started to happen in the Discord is we got more and more people. I think we're now like 1,600 members. But there was a natural skew towards info publishing. It definitely kind of became the backbone of the Discord. And I've never really been interested in info products. I didn't know anything about financial. I still don't. I'd always been interested in physical products. I just kind of found it slightly more interesting. 9 months ago, 10 months ago, so around when you joined, it was around the same time I read Scientific Advertising by Claude Hopkins, which was massive for me. Around that time is when I got SaaS clients, and I helped with some core stuff, and I helped with local business services, SaaSes online when I started working with agencies, which was just a case of, again, contacting agencies saying, hey, I noticed like you've done this work before, here's a spec piece, what do you think, have you got any room for new freelancers? So I started working with those on service-based stuff, and it just so happened that one of the clients I worked with said, oh, we are doing a partnership with a hot tub. Do you want to be on the campaign? And I said, sure. I was like, okay, I'm fine. And I had no preconception about how to write copy for something physical. I'd only done services. So through the Discord and through learning from people like you and info products, I was like, well, let's just take that element of it, that area, and just apply it to this thing. Did that, it went quite well. From there, I got bicycles and like water filtration systems and things that were more tangible. And I guess that's a big part for me is physical products tend to be more tangible. Like there's a clear thing that they fix or do that you can't argue with. Like you can approach it from different angles, but there is an end result of that. that's when I kind of realized, hey, you know what? I much prefer doing physical products. How about I just start applying what I'm learning from info products and from you guys in Discord to this other world, which no one really talks about. Ultimately, what I found was it's all persuasive principles at the end of the day. It's just ways of writing to convince someone to take an action. So it doesn't matter what medium you're going through, what the end result is going to be. In the last 6 months, I kind of just had a baptism by fire into the rest of the e-com world. So I kind of took a step back from like high ticket stuff because I got this opportunity. And now I do subscription products, so physical products. I now work with like 2 of the UK's largest suppliers. My most recent contract I set up the other week is effectively just a serial entrepreneurship, identify a market, go in, set up a business, automate it, move on, which is now what we're kind of moving on to. So yeah, that has really been my journey so far.
Awesome. I have a load of questions, but I want to ask for clarity on one thing that you just said. You're working with a team now that's sort of like jumping from niche to niche and setting up these subscription services. Are you selling the white labeling to others, or are you just, okay, set up a subscription service for this, that's dialed in, move on to this thing, get that dialed in, and then move on?
So we're doing a mix. For one part, we're developing our own products from scratch because the guy I'm working with that's just what he does primarily. And to begin with, we're just white label. We're just getting from suppliers existing products, white label, slapping our brand on them and saying, okay, right, let's enter an existing market. It's a really fascinating world to be in.
Rod and Luke, I know you guys have some experience with e-commerce too. And I have some too, but I come at it from a very different slant. I'd love to know what you guys think.
One question I have is, so you started off in info products and you make this transition to e-commerce, I guess, a little bit at a time. But where do you feel like you developed your sense for how to write for e-commerce products or physical products as opposed to info products? Because they're very different beasts.
I guess one thing I try and say to people is and I'm guilty of saying this when I'm giving explanations, but is to try not to think of them as like physical products are this whole thing that you write for. It's so varied, just as info products are. There's a case to be made of physical products that are even more varied. I didn't pick up a sense for like, oh right, there's these unsaid rules about how you write for physical products, because the way I would write or the way I wrote for, a hot tub versus how I write for like a gluten-free snack bar, it's so insanely different. But effectively, if you're identifying problems and showing someone that you have a solution for it, you're going to make the sale.
I've written for some e-commerce products, for example, like I wrote like an ad for like installing, well, it's sort of like a service, but like pools. And with that, I was like, okay, it's pretty easy to sort of translate that because it's like a high ticket item. So, like really want to go heavy on the DR principles. But like, how would you approach it for like, like lower ticket items? Like, like a snack bar, like I would feel that's sort of different than like a high ticket item, right?
The short version of that really is sometimes, especially with low ticket physical products, is people are just looking for something there and then. They just want to know that it's going to solve their problem. You don't have to do so much idea selling with some e-commerce, whereas with info products, you have to sell on big ideas and you have to go like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, or you have to get into it from this angle, or it's like this really specific thing. With physical products, it's sometimes enough to just say, you have this problem, here is the thing that's going to solve it, here's a demonstration of that thing. Demonstrations are quite literally worth 1,000 words when it comes to physical products. Sometimes just having a GIF of what your product does is gonna outsell any kind of writing you can do. So I guess to answer your question, Luke, it's like, yeah, you don't need to worry necessarily about kind of going, oh, which angle am I taking for this? Sometimes like, okay, what are people saying is the problem? Lead with that, show them how this thing solves it, and then give them an option to buy it.
Would you say that's like mostly because there's a difference in buyer's intent? People go out there just because like they already know that they want to get something.
Yeah, I mean, well then I suppose you're kind of moving into stages of awareness there as well. This morning, one of the things I've been doing recently is Google Ads, which I've never done before. I didn't spend ages reading about Google ad strategy. I read about how to do the tech stuff for it because I wanted to make sure my team kind of were doing it the right way. But I just kind of, okay, right, let's think about the idea here. Okay, if someone's Googling something, well, they already know they want that thing. Clearly, they're already at that solution aware stage because we're targeting people who already know what they want. All I need to do is call them out really directly, either the problem or the person that is going to be searching it, and just give them the biggest benefit.
Would you say that's something you see a lot in like e-commerce? Like, do you see a lot of solution aware? Because you're like so directing at like, like Google Ads to direct product. Like, is it something you see a lot?
Yeah, it depends. It definitely depends on the medium you're using and who you're targeting. Again, it's so varied. Like,
Yeah.
I think one thing we should avoid is clumping e-com as its own thing and saying like, oh, generally people are in this section, because that's just not the case. Typically, when people are using Google Ads, I found that people who are searching, who are solution aware, it's quite easy to just go like, oh, right, just say the thing that they're searching for, which a lot of people just don't do.
While we're on the subject of these specific products, like particularly snacks, one place I find myself very often is I'll be on Facebook, on Instagram, or whatever, and I'll be browsing, and it'll be some low ticket snack item, some chips or whatever. I guess I am product aware. I know these things exist, and I'm not really looking for them. I don't have a particular problem. I'll just click and buy them because, fuck it, it's $3. How do you think about writing for those sorts of products where the problem they're solving is not very high and there is a sort of like whimsy, for fun purchase factor to it, which is, I guess, more of a sense of delight?
No, that is a really good point, and it's actually something that I have had to give a reality check to some of the people I've been working with recently. One of the guys, the sales director, of one of the companies I'm working with at the moment, he said, okay, well, how can we sell our crisps direct to consumer? Potato chips. Sorry, guys. How can we sell those direct to consumer? And I was like, don't sell them direct to consumer. There's nothing special about them. There's not an angle we can take that is going to justify spending a budget on Facebook ads. It's not solving a tangible problem that people are going to go out their way to go, yeah, I'm going to click on this ad. Crisps are something you buy in a weekly grocery shop. Kind of to your point, Ron, like there are certain things that people need to understand, that if there's no tangible problem there, sometimes it's just not worth it. Not everything can be made to work.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that, though? Have you set up any tests or funnels where you're selling the product that does have some sort of USP, and then you either have what's called an order form bump or an upsell that includes the chips?
Simple answer is no. There is actually a couple of products there that we could sell direct to consumer because they do have more USP. We haven't tried like adding an order bump to any of those and saying, oh, get free stuff like that. That's definitely something that would have more of a chance of working. But yeah, definitely it's something that can work.
Do you have other challenges with that? Like, is it different for you to do that B2B type of sales? Because you're no longer selling to a consumer, you're selling to this big, like a big, like maybe a supermarket or like a distribution center. How is that?
I haven't done that much B2B before. So one of the SaaSes I did was B2B. I think we sold some water filtration stuff B2B, but like I wasn't really part of it. So I'm not experienced in B2B, but again, I almost feel like B2B/B2C is one of those things that you do need to consider, but don't get too wrapped up in it, because at the end of the day, you're still selling to a person who has a problem. Maybe that problem is kind of once removed, then it becomes like, oh, you need to sell this to customers. Here is why it's good at doing that, instead of here is why the thing itself is good. So you're still just identifying a problem and kind of showing them why you have a solution to it.
This taught me how to do Google PPC ads, Harry Marshall's Google AdWords book. It was actually my bathroom book for a long time. I needed to learn PPC and didn't really have a lot of time to learn PPC, so I just learned PPC while PPPing. That helped me tremendously, because when you start to manage teams and you start to get higher and higher in terms of your copywriting career, and you become more, I guess, enmeshed, less with the granular writing an actual ad and more involved in the actual marketing, you need to have a good sense of how all the different pieces work. To that end, I would say definitely test an order form bump on your, not only your direct-to-consumer, but also your B2B, because I have tested it time and time again. And if you have the right small little doodad add-on for your order form, it can massively increase your average cart value. Average cart value is, for everybody who buys, how much on average do they spend? And you want your ACV, or average cart value, to be as high as possible, so that you can take that revenue and pour it back into ads to get more customers that again get into the funnel. That's why things like order form bumps, multi-tiered offers, upsells, downsells, cross-sells, that's why that all exists. In any sort of marketing context, it's a top-line business, so your revenue goes straight into paying for more ads. One thing that I'd love to hear you speak about, Alex, is I guess the specifics of what you do with some of this e-commerce stuff, because nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, you know what I really want? A subscription box of dog toys. But at the same time, people do wake up in the morning and go, you know what I really want? A nice tasty snack. Those are two completely different levels, not necessarily of awareness, but of desire. And what I've found working mainly with info products, but the weird thing about financial is like, I've also sold physical books, I've also sold thermal blankets, I've sold tents, I've sold weird, basically truncheon devices. The techniques that I learned in financial parlayed really well into selling physical objects that you don't wake up in the morning and go, man, I really need that.
Ultimately, problems are markets. So I think my kind of philosophy is you need to be starting with some kind of problem. You need to have an idea of what your product's actually doing. The way I think about this, and this isn't necessarily the perfect formula, but for me, I group products into two kind of metrics to measure products. And this is all slightly arbitrary, but hopefully you understand what I mean. And I mentioned one of them already, which is I use kind of how functional is a product versus how tribal is a product. Those are two things I kind of see myself looking at. And by functional, I mean, how much does it actually solve a problem? Just take a packet of crisps, because that's what we've mentioned. On the surface, it's not solving a desperate problem, but it's still necessary for something. It's still partly a functional product because it's food. But the first thing you just want to think about is, okay, is this solving a problem? Is this actually needed by someone? The other metric is how tribal is it? And by tribal, I mean, how much does someone associate themselves with the problem that's being solved? Or how much do they associate themselves with your product? Do they label themselves as something that your product also lives in the world of? That can be a really good route into getting someone to buy something. For example, take a phone. That is something that is both highly functional and highly tribal. People care a lot about what kind of phone they have in a lot of cases. You can build a company like Apple around, oh yeah, I want the next Apple product, I want the next thing, but it's also serving a very particular purpose. But then you have products that are kind of just purely tribal. They're there just because, and people feel good about associating with them. Particularly subscription boxes. Like this is where subscription boxes come into a lot of time. So a cheese club, a wine club, a gym club, things like that. Anything that's kind of club. Most people aren't like at home, like you say, Sean, going, oh, really, I really want some gin right now. It's more a case of going, I want to associate myself with that product because that feels good. I feel good getting something that makes me feel classy. If you can think about how much a product fits into those two categories, it makes things a lot easier to think about with e-commerce particularly. Because one of the biggest problems with e-commerce is when a brand has a product that is really could be sitting anywhere, but especially if it's mainly functional and it solves some kind of problem, but they want it to be tribal. Like they want to build a community around it. They want people to think like, oh my God, yeah, I so associate with this. Like, oh my God, I love it. I have to tell my friends about it. And that's where so many e-commerce brands go wrong, is because they take inspiration from companies like Apple. They have this mass craze around them and they go, yeah, but look, Apple are doing that. Or Microsoft's doing that, or Gymshark are doing that. Like, why can't we have this kind of camaraderie around our products? And that really translates into, we need to be big on social media, and we need to entertain people, and we need to do creativity and have cool adverts and things. That is a big problem in e-commerce, and that is what I think 90% of all e-com brands suffer from, which is really good if you're watching this and you think, I really want to use my copywriting abilities to make a difference in e-commerce, because one thing you can do that these people aren't doing is increase sales, and it's actually quite easy to do.
Luke is probably feeling very triggered right now.
Yes, of course. I need Apple.
Yeah, like I would probably agree that like 90% of like all businesses or e-commerce businesses really want to, they want to sound like they're Apple. And like one of my clients literally said that, like after I submitted a bunch of work to them. They were like, this is not like Apple, so this is bad. Like I'm from this standpoint, like, hey, like Alex said, I'm here to increase your sales, right? I'm not here to make you sound like Apple. First of all, you don't have the budget to be able to do that. Second of all, you don't have that type of recognition, like at all. But like they disagreed, and like I said, or well, I just ended the contract. I was like, okay, I don't want to work with you anymore.
Until you are a $5 to $10 million business and operations are actually literally starting to break, the only priority for you is sales. The end. Full stop. Once you get beyond that point, like, okay, let's invest some of that revenue into better operations, logistics, processes, branding, other things. In the first few years of a business's life, it's kill or be killed. If you aren't thinking about sales, you will be killed. The end. And
Yeah.
Alex, has that been the experience that you've seen in e-commerce, or have you sort of like been lucky enough to only work for people who actually understand or appreciate the value of sales?
I think I have been lucky in almost every case. Really, I chalk it up to the network that I built, because the people I work with now are people I was referred to. And if you're referred to someone, there's already that implication of trust there. I did work with one or two companies who I stopped working with because they took a different direction. They weren't like nightmare clients like Luke had. They kind of insisted on doing it their own way and thinking about using certain messaging that they wanted to reflect their brand, which is fair enough. If someone wants to do that, it's up to them, it's their business. But you're absolutely right, Sean, in that what I've seen is you have to focus on sales in the first instance. But what's worked for me is that identifying those markets where the stars align and you have a product that people can like label themselves with, and they're already in that world, and you can go, I want to associate myself with this. A really good example recently of how we've done this is that gluten-free snack bar I was talking about. The guy who had that was a friend of one of my other clients, and he came to me and he said, how do we sell this? I want to sell this to as many people as possible. At that point, it was just a snack bar. And I said, that's not how e-commerce works. I was like, you can't just have something and go, right, sell it to everyone online. It's not like an impulse buy at the front of the shop. So I was like, give me a couple, let me have a look at the product, send me a couple, give me the ingredients list, let me have a look. And what I noticed is it was gluten-free. I noticed that there are very few gluten-free wafers on the market, which is what this was. And the more I started to look into this market, I realized a lot of people who are gluten-free, like that is their kind of life. That is the label they give themselves. There are tons of gluten-free influencers and people who just talk about, I went out and I found this food. Oh yeah, this brand's really good. And they make it all about themselves, especially their kind of online footprint. It's all about gluten-free. So I said, all right, we could actually have something here. Instead of just saying, okay, this is a product here, like let's drum up this gluten-free aspect of it. It just happened to be gluten-free. They didn't make it that way. It was just the manufacturing process just happened to make it gluten-free. I said, okay, right, let's hammer home this point. And now we've gone to the point where we're not just like this single snack bar, we are now a gluten-free brand. We lead gluten-free. We're kind of coming onto the scene in the UK going like this, we are this sweet treat gluten-free company. Because a lot of people who are gluten-free, they have to put up with horrible food a lot of the time. They don't get nice kind of biscuits, and so they want that kind of, oh God, I want a brand I can feel good with. And now we've taken that tribal aspect of the product. We're not saying, oh, this tastes good. We're saying we're now fighting for more gluten-free recognition in the UK. And alongside it, we've set up a community of giving gluten-free people in the UK a peek behind the curtain at the gluten-free food industry. And that was, I think, probably my proudest example of taking something that is, there's no clear benefit of it, or no one's going to wake up and go, oh, I really want this thing, and just going, okay, let's make them want it by giving these other benefits around it, not just what it is.
Once you get into the higher and higher stages, and you have to start thinking about not just you and your finance, but also what is best for the business and how this business functions in a market, well, then you have to start actually thinking about what distinguishes this business? What distinguishes its product line? How do you find your ideal customer? How do you identify what your optimal selling strategy is? And it seems like you put in a lot of that skull sweat, metaphorically speaking, before you put pen to paper. And I imagine that was a very complicated and drawn out process in terms of research.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I must have about 100 pages of not just voice of customer data, but also statistics, history about the gluten-free community, and laws about things of gluten-free food and things that the target market cares about as well. I initially felt a bit bad for the Seth, the guy who owns the business, because he said, oh, I just want to sell something online and we just want to sell it. kind of brought him around to the way of thinking like, look, if we put a bit more effort into this and we hold off on launching straight away and we just put an extra month into setting all of this up, we're gonna be far better off, which is now paying off. Is the Wi-Fi still good?
You appeared to glitch for just a moment. It's
Okay.
fine now.
I didn't see it.
We are approaching 10 o'clock, and so we will have to wrap up. And I want to say that I really appreciate your time. And I was wondering, Alex, if you had another 10 to 15 minutes to spare to actually, people watching this have been looking at this BarkBox website, taking up most of the screen for the last hour. And going, why is that there? And we just haven't talked about it. If you wouldn't mind staying on for a little bit, we can have bonus material for the Patreon, which we have a Patreon, by the way. If you like the show, please go to patreon.com/, I forget the URL. It'll be in a description, or it'll be somewhere. If you like us and you have the money to spare, if you don't have the money to spare, don't spend money, but we put extras and bonuses and like other material onto the Patreon. Feel free to subscribe if you want. If not, you're free to do whatever you would like. You're your own person, and I respect you.
Okay,
Guys,
yeah.
I think we need to wrap it up. That's been the Copy That Show. This has been Alex and Rod and Luke, and I am Sean. Thank you all so much. I'm ending the stream now. For real. Goodbye.